Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to talk about the reasons that I personally chose to live here in the Philippines rather than to live in Thailand. So for my backdrop today, I hiked back up to this really nice monastery out in the province, and there's just gorgeous nature all around. Of course, you can hear they're doing some landscaping there in the background. But just amazing nature. So a little bit of background. I had chosen to live here in the Philippines as a home base. I'd been back and forth in Thailand and Philippines. I spent a lot of time in both places until I moved here this time a few months ago. I had lived in Thailand for almost half a year. Basically, I had lived there from the beginning of October until the very last couple days of March, and lived in Chiang Mai, mostly in the north of Thailand, but also spent about a month and a half down in the islands, home based in Phuket. So this video, I'm going to go over my reasons that are very personal to me. It won't really apply to everyone, but it may help you inform your decision making if you decide to live in one of these places and why. So let's jump into it. So in making a decision over Thailand and the Philippines, it's important to understand that they are very different countries. They attract a lot of the similarly situated expats and individuals, but they are very different countries. They are very different cultures. And until you've actually been on the ground in both of them, you really would not be able to make a good decision. Now, even though I have chosen the Philippines, that doesn't mean I don't love Thailand. I absolutely love Thailand. It's a wonderful place. I will be back many times, trust me. I'll just be going back for shorter stints and for vacations because the Philippines is going to be my home in Asia at this point. But that does not detract from how wonderful Thailand is and how much I really love Thailand. Now, one of the biggest reasons that we chose the Philippines really is very personal to us. So I am married to a Filipina. So she has family here. I have in-laws here. And so that is very convenient if I want to leave the country. I've got someone who can look over my place, who can take care of that. And I just don't have that in Thailand. So it's not a strike really against Thailand. It's just where I have resources. And also, obviously, we like to see my wife's family. We have children, so they need to be around their grandparents and to see their cousins and get to know them just like they have when we were living in America with my folks. So that's kind of unique to our situation, but it was a huge factor in me choosing the Philippines over Thailand. So another reason that was very important, and again, is kind of unique to our situation, it might not be unique to other people who are looking to move abroad, but is school. So one of my children is a minor and is still in elementary school. So we had been homeschooling for the first year that we were abroad. I did my master's work in teaching, so I was qualified for that, and we could still get the school credits to continue to advance him. But eventually, we had to settle down somewhere to have a home base so that he can go back live to school. So we had looked at schools, international schools, because he only speaks English. He doesn't speak Bisaya or Tagalog or Thai or any other language. He needed to be able to go to a international school where the curriculum was taught in English. And the schools in Chiang Mai, where we were living, and elsewhere in Thailand as well, they have some excellent international schools. Some of the students there, I mean, if you were to meet a Thai person who went to, say, an American international school in Chiang Mai, when they are talking to you in English, you're going to think they grew up in California. You will not be able to know that they're a native Thai speaker just from talking to them in English. Excellent schools and very good education on there. And the Philippines, their international schools are really good as well. There's more of a market for it because there's just more money and more of a middle class in Thailand than there is in the Philippines. But in Thailand and Chiang Mai, the cost of a private school tuition for a year was going to be at least $10,000 a year, which is more than I would have paid for, it's a lot more than I would have paid just for accommodations in Thailand. So that's a huge cost. Now, if that's where you're gonna stay, it's well worth it to get your child that education. But in the Philippines, I can do it for far, far less. We're talking a maximum of what we're looking at would be $2,000 a year. And some schools, very good schools, is like $120 a month during the school year. So much more affordable if you were trying to put a child into school. That was huge for us. And also, my son really needs to learn, you know, the other half of his ancestral languages. So that was a consideration. We also wanted him to have exposure to his cousins. He hadn't had exposure to cousins since we left the United States, other playmates and stuff. So it was just, you know, it was a good choice for us as a home base. And again, that's unique to us. It does happen with other people who are wanting to move families out there into a consideration. So the costs of Thailand, if you're going to go as a family, unless you're going to homeschool, is going to be a huge factor in your costs. And suddenly Thailand doesn't become as affordable for many families as you would have thought. All right, gonna hike over here a little bit, try to get away from the noise and talk about the language. Okay, a lot of people in the comments were saying, oh, it's about the language, it's about the language. And yeah, it is to an extent. Obviously in the Philippines, it's very hard to find a place where somebody doesn't speak English. It's, you know, it's one of the official national languages here. Their laws are published in English. All the signs have English. And in Thailand, you know, your road signs and stuff are going to be both in Thai and it's going to be in English. But as far as the amount of people who speak English, obviously, I mean, nothing compares to the Philippines and Asia. They're just, it's a unique country because, you know, it has a history of being tied to the United States, and it's one of their languages. It's where most of the call centers seem to be going. But I did learn some Thai when I was there, and if I had stayed long term, obviously I would have done that as well. But, and that sound you're seeing, I'll show you in a moment, is they're sweeping. But the benefit of the English language in the Philippines is that it gives me more choices of where I could live. So I was happy in Chiang Mai, and you know, you could live in Bangkok, you could live down in the islands, Koh Samui, Phuket, places like that, even Phi Phi, although I think that would be very expensive. There is a lot of English speakers there, and you can get by. But the farther you go out in the provinces of Thailand, the much less English are going to occur, and if you want to live in those areas, it's going to be harder for you unless you immerse yourself into the language. And I got to be honest with you, I'm good at a lot of things academically, but languages have always escaped me. I'm very poor in them. My wife, very good. She took Thai when she was in Thailand, learned some Thai. Every country we've been to, she picks up the local lingo very quick. But for me, that's just, my brain doesn't function that way. So it provided me with more choices here in the Philippines because I can go live in any province I want to without having that barrier. Now, to me, it wasn't as huge a decision as everybody in the comments seems to think it was, but it certainly is a factor. And I think it is a factor for most people when they're going to choose a place that they're going to live long term. By the way, guys, if you're enjoying this content, hit the like button. It helps other people find this content if they're interested in it. And if you want to see more of this content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can find me again on YouTube, because after this video, I may have disappeared forever. All right, thanks, guys. A huge issue in making a decision for anybody is going to be immigration when choosing which country to live in. And the truth is that in the Philippines, immigration, visas, much easier for Westerners than it is going to be living in Thailand. Thailand's visa situation is complex. For the most part, it really just boils down to money in Thailand. I guarantee you, if you want to stay long-term in Thailand, there is a way. It's just about costs. Now, nobody on YouTube is going to tell you exactly how you can stay most efficiently in Thailand, you're gonna have to get on the ground and talk to somebody in person. Visa agents, other expats, trust me, everything becomes crystal clear once you're there, how things work. But in the Philippines, it's very easy. If you're a Westerner, you're entitled to come in, visa exempt, and you can continue renewing that for up to 3 years before you have to make a visa run and leave the country. In my situation, though, it was even better because I get to stay 1 year on the current one that I came in on, which was the Balik Bayon, because I'm married to a Filipina, and I can actually get permanent residency here quite easily and very affordably. So that's an option. In Thailand, permanent residency really is much more complicated. There's not an easy path to that at all. Staying, sure, you can pay more money. So again, it comes down to where I'm getting more value for what I'm looking for. And in the Philippines, I'm getting a lot more value through immigration than I am in Thailand. And so that's a factor that has to go into your decision making. I know a lot of YouTubers right now. I was kind of in a bustling place in Chiang Mai with tons of YouTubers. They're all leaving Thailand right now. And a lot of them are going to Vietnam. Tons of them are coming to the Philippines. And I know exactly why they are, and one of those reasons is because of certain visa changes that happened in the last couple of months. I don't know, maybe I'll talk about that. Somebody wants to see a video on that? Leave it in the comments below. All right, so one of the big factors in deciding to have a home base anywhere is going to be the costs. And if you are earning in a hard currency, such as the euro or the US dollar, and you're spending in Filipino pesos or in Thai baht, then you're going to have a lot more purchasing power than you would if you were earning in the local economy. So if you are earning in one of those hard currencies, such as I am, then it makes a place like the Philippines or Thailand much more affordable, and the value you get is much higher than what you would back in the West, such as Western Europe or the United States or Canada. So one of the costs to consider is housing. So in Thailand, the value of the housing as far as luxury and how nice the property is, your money goes a lot farther in Thailand. However, it is possible in the Philippines to actually get, if you're staying long term, less expensive accommodation than I could achieve for the same amount of square footage or square meters than I would in Thailand. Wait for this car to go by and then I'll be back. So in my case, I'm only paying about $460 less in the Philippines than I was per month for accommodation than I was in Thailand. Now, there's a trade-off there because I do pay twice as much as I do in utilities in the Philippines than I would have for the same services in Thailand. The other thing to consider is food costs. So for me in the Philippines, the types of food that I like to go grocery shopping for, which would include beef, would include pork, would include certain types of vegetables and other things that are just part of my normal diet, are far less expensive and more available in the Philippines than they are in Thailand. Now, if you're in Bangkok, if you're in Manila, you know, that's two totally different things. Those are huge international cities and you can find pretty much anything you want there. Again, the price of poker goes up for living in those places though. But living out in Chiang Mai, like I did, or in Phuket in Thailand, or living out in the provinces in the Davao region like I am here in the Philippines, I can get those things because there is an expat community here, and there are also a lot of OFWs, overseas foreign worker Filipinos, that like the stuff that they have when they're abroad, and so there's a market to have stores bring those goods in here. So I can find them, and they are less expensive than they were in Thailand. So also dealing with costs is the factors that you got to consider of transportation. So both in Thailand and in the Philippines, it's fairly affordable as far as getting around local transportation. But it's a little bit less in the Philippines. So if I want to get around Chiang Mai, you know, $3 for a taxi or less. In Davao, it's going to be even cheaper than that. It's going to be $2, $3 if I'm going a very long distance. Again, pedicabs and local transportation, Y'all can hear the bugs have come to life out here today. Still cheaper. Now, the opposite is true if I want to go long distances, like airplane flights. Thailand's cheaper. Thailand has a rail system. The Philippines doesn't. So going long distances, it is much cheaper to get around in Thailand than it is here in the Philippines. And that was a factor to consider because I'm going to have to fly in and out. I have to go to Europe. I have to go to the United States sometimes. And getting to the main airport and then getting transportation from those main airports, such as Manila or Bangkok, I can still get it more affordably in Bangkok flying anywhere else than I could in the Philippines. And so that was a drawback that I had to take into consideration when we chose a home base. Now, I will tell you this. If I were single and I were in my 20s, my choice would have been different. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife. I was much younger, and I would be choosing Thailand. And I would be doing it because the value I can get, I can hop all over the place in Thailand compared to the Philippines for vacations. So if I want to go to the beach, a special beach here in the Philippines, I want to go up to Coron, I want to go up to Palawan, I'm going to pay 2 to 5 times as much for the same type of accommodation that I would get in Thailand. Thailand is set up for tourism. The hotels and things, the value you get is just much nicer. A hotel that I would have gotten at a 5-star luxury resort, $52 on Coron Beach in Thailand, Phuket. I was paying $52 a night. In the Philippines, that same place, something similar nearby here, say on Samal, similar quality, be $200, $250 a night. There's just, and it would not be as nice as the place that I stayed. There is no place as nice as that in the Davao region. Again, I love the Philippines. I'm not knocking it. I'm just being honest that there's not as much competition here, and so the prices are higher for hotel accommodations and for tourism. So guys, I'm really curious. Where would you have chosen? Would you choose Thailand? Would you choose Philippines? Why? Let me know in the comments below. I'm very interested in seeing what all of you guys would think and what your thoughts are of the benefits and where you would want to live and why. All right, so I'm going to finish my hike here today, and I'm gonna put a link to a video that I did on the card here at the end, where is a man-made islet that I visited a few weeks ago here in Davao del Sur. It's a really neat place. If you haven't seen that, check it out if you're interested in those types of locations. Thanks, guys.